I took the next day off and we spent the day together visiting the Art Institute, digging out old photos from my closet, visiting supermarket where Auma decided that Americans were friendly and overweight. She was stubborn sometimes impish, sometimes burdened with the weight of the world, but always asserting a self-reliance that I recognized as I learned that it's a response, my own response to uncertainty. We didn't speak much about our father, though it was as if our conversation stopped whenever we threatened to skirt his memory. It was only that night, after dinner, and after a long walk along the lake's crumbling break wall, that we both sensed we couldn't go any further until we opened up the subject. And so I made us some tea, and Auma began to tell me about the old man, at least what she could remember. I can't say I really knew him, Barack. Maybe nobody did. Not really. His life was so scattered. People only knew scraps and pieces. Even his own children. I was scared of him. You know, he was already away when I was born. He was in Hawaii with your mom, and then at Harvard. When he came back to Kenya, our oldest brother Roy and I were small children. We had lived with our mom in the country, in Alego, up until then. I was too young to remember much about him coming. I was 4, but Roy was 6. So maybe he can tell you more about what happened. I just remember that he came back with an American woman named Ruth, and that he took us from our mother to go live with them in Nairobi. I remember that this woman Ruth was the first white person I had ever been near, and that suddenly she was supposed to be my new mother. I don't know exactly why we didn't stay with my own mother, but I guess here in Kenya, men get to keep children in a divorce, if they want them, that is. I asked my mom about this, but it's difficult for her to talk. She only says that the old man's new wife refused to live with another wife. And so my mom thought us children would be better off living with the old man because he was rich. In those first years, he was doing really well. He was working with an American oil company, Shell, I think. And it was only a few years after independence. He was well connected with all the top government people. He had gone to school with many of them. The vice president, ministers, they would all come to the house sometimes and drink with him while talking about politics. He had a big house and a big car, and everybody was impressed with him because he was so young. But he already had so much education from abroad. And he had an American wife, which was still rare, although later, when he was still married to Ruth, he could go out sometimes with my real mom as if he had to show people that he could also have this beautiful African woman whenever he chose. I didn't think much about this until later. The way our lives were divided into two, because I was so young. I think it was harder on Roy because he was old enough to remember what it had been like in Alego, living in the village with our mom and our people. Then things began to change when Ruth gave birth to Mark and David, and her attention shifted to them. The old man left the American company to work in the government for the Ministry of Tourism. He might have had political ambitions, and at first he was doing well in government. But by 1966 or 67, the divisions in Kenya had become more serious. President Kenyatta came from the largest tribe, the Kikuyus. The second largest tribe, the Luos, began to complain that Kikuyus were getting all the best jobs. The government was full of intrigue. The vice president, Odinga, was a Luo, and he said the government was becoming corrupt. That instead of serving those who had fought for independence, Kenyan politicians had taken the place of white colonialists, buying up businesses and land that should have been distributed to the people. Odinga started his own party, but was placed under house arrest as a communist. Another popular Luo minister, Tom Mboya, was killed by a Kikuyu gunman. Luos began to protest in the streets, and the government police cracked down hard. People were killed. All this created more suspicion between the two largest tribes. Most of the old man's friends just kept quiet and learned to live with the situation. But the old man began to speak up. He would tell people that tribalism was going to ruin the country and that unqualified men were taking the best jobs. His friends tried to warn him about speaking such things in public, but he didn't care.